You're watching News 24 Live. Road safety has severely been under the spotlight, particularly this week after the Transport Minister released the Easter weekend road death statistics, which did not make for good reading. They were far worse than last year. It has now come to light that government is in talks to introduce a system where Metro police officers can randomly stop motorists and retest their driving. This, of course, has not gone down well with the public. In particular, the Justice Project. To tell us a little bit more about this is Sergio Davids from Wheels 24. Sergio, thanks for coming in this morning.
Always a pleasure, Nick.
Yes, public outcry, but like I said, particularly by the Justice Project. Who are the Justice Project? And the chairperson is the guy who's getting particularly irate and vocal about this.
Indeed, and rightly so. Justice Project South Africa, led by Howard Dembowski. They tackle all forms of corruption, crime, etc. in South Africa. And in this case, they're rightly so to have a public outcry. The Transport Minister has suggested that Metro cops have the ability to pull over random drivers and perform a retest of their driver's license. This seems to be a go-to strategy for our law enforcement. Instead of enforcing existing laws, they'd rather come up with poorly thought out future regulations and strategies. The Transport Minister, I can understand where she's coming from. Our Easter weekend statistics were appalling. We had 287 deaths recorded over the weekend. So I can understand why the need for something drastic, but retest drivers? I mean, how has this even been thought out? I have a few points on this. I would like to know, and I suppose a lot of our readers would like to know, how will this actually be enforced? Will the Minister require that Metro cops pull over random drivers and perform a K53 on the side of the road? Are they going to take you to the station and perform the test there? Will police officers have to be certified in order to administer these kinds of tests?
Well, this is the point that the Justice Project is making, is that Metro police officers are not qualified to carry out these tests.
Indeed. The other point that the Justice Project brought up is the not so small problem in South Africa of corruption. Even if they go ahead and do this, they get their cops certified, they can pull you over, they can do the test. Even if this goes, and that's a huge if, corruption will always be there. And as some of our readers have pointed out, this becomes another revenue stream for corrupt officials.
Just a quote from Howard Dembowski. Firstly, very few traffic officers, let alone Metro policemen or women, are qualified driving license examiners. And secondly, randomized retesting is not the solution to the widespread systematic corruption in the issuing of driving licenses. I guess also the main thing that stood out for me is, I mean, if they implement this, is it going to stop this culture of reckless driving? I mean, you know, if you've got your driver's license through the right means and methods, it's still not going to change a culture of reckless driving.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because one of the Transport Minister's biggest concerns regarding road deaths is that she feels that a lot of drivers have a lack of practice, is what she described it as. The problem is a lack of practice in terms of skill behind the wheel is something like stalling at a robot, not knowing what to do at a four-way stop or a traffic circle. Blatant disregard for the rules is what we have in South Africa. You see it every day. Taxis blatantly disregarding rules, overtaking other cars, not indicating, tailgating. So it might come as a shock to many, including the Transport Minister, that there's just a culture change that's needed, not a lack of practice that needs to be rectified.
Now, the government are arguing, according to the reports, that the National Road Traffic Act empowers traffic officers to do this. The Justice Project are arguing otherwise, that they don't. So who's right in that instance?
Look, I will defer to the Justice Project SA. They have a lot of legal minds behind them, so they would know. Also, the National Road Traffic Act, as far as I'm aware, does not preclude traffic and Metro officials from administering this kind of test. Regardless of whether or not it's in there, they'd have to be certified in any case. Metro cops, that is, not the traffic officers.
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, the public outcry has been quite immense. I just want to read out some of the social media reaction to this. There's a tweet from Margaret Ross. She says, well, I hope this includes every taxi driver, bus driver, and truck driver in the country. If not, they ain't testing me. So like you were saying earlier, I guess, I mean, according to the stats as well, that does seem to be where most of the accidents and fatalities are, you know, taxi drivers, truck drivers, etc.
Agreed, but just on the tweet, if the Transport Department isn't prepared to affect this regarding all road users, and that includes public and commercial as well, then what's the point? Taxi drivers are still going to do what they do, corrupt officials are still going to be there, and then why should the public go ahead and be sort of victimized by being pulled over across the road and performing a K53 test, probably one that you haven't taken in many years?
And then just here, obviously, some of the comments under the article itself. Here's quite an irate one from Fernrose Amber Forster. What an absurd idea. I can drive perfectly but struggled with the K53 when getting my license. So am I going to get my license revoked because I didn't use my handbrake when stopping at a stop street, or something equally useless?
I think the reader makes a very good point. What will happen? How will the test be administered? I mean, assuming they're going to pull you over randomly at a roadblock, or perhaps the Coast Guard's going to do this, how will the test be administered?
Yeah.
How will they know what your ability to drive is? Are they literally going to do a K53 test again? These are questions that beg answers from the Transport Department.
I mean, I'm sure you and I are both guilty of one. I am of rolling back slightly on hill starts, crossing my hands over when I turn. I mean, those are all things that you can get felled for when you do your driver's test.
Exactly, and the problem is, in an ideal world, everyone adheres to the K53. That's not the case. That was never going to be the case. And now to require, even if you've been a driver for many years, you still might fail a K53 test simply because a K53 test enables you to drive at a K53 level.
And then one last comment from Andre Pretorius. He says, please do proper road traffic enforcement of all moving violations, and that does not mean sitting behind a camera! Exclamation mark times 3.
I agree with the tweeter. Basically, it comes down to what I've said at the start of this. Enforce the existing laws, and you'll change the hearts and minds of drivers there. As the tweeter pointed out, why are cops not performing visible law enforcement? Get out from behind the bushes. You've heard that time and time again. Visible law enforcement means I've got to behave while on the roads. I see the cop, I'm not going to do something dangerous or stupid because I know he's there. He's not going to be hiding behind a bush just trying to snap me for speeding, and then I'll continue on my merry way.
So what do you think the chances are of this being rolled out?
Well, it's interesting that they're in talks with this. According to Justice Project SA, they're going to fight this tooth and nail, regardless of whether or not they want to
But
push
I understand
this through.
they are an NGO of sorts, or a...
Indeed, but
How much clout do they have?
quite a bit. They've been operating for many, many years and fighting the good fight in terms of corruption and rooting out all sorts of, well, in this case, silly and poorly thought out regulations. So here's hoping we fight this. There should also be a public vote as well. Why don't we have a say in this?
Okay. Thank you, Sergio.
Cheers.